Welcome to the Cyber Insights Podcast, brought to you by the Greater Washington, D.C. chapter of ISACA. I'm your host, Jim Wiggins, joined today by my co-host, Mr. Altan Bulut. Our guest today is Ms. Nirali Chawla, and we'll be discussing governance, risk, and compliance in modern cybersecurity. Let's get into the episode. All right. Well, welcome, everybody. This is, as I mentioned to you before, Jim Wiggins, and I am joined by Altan Bulut, and we have Ms. Nirali Chawla. Nurali, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Jim and Altan.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Altan, how are you doing today?
Yeah, doing great, Jim. I'm really excited to get started.
And we're super excited to have Nirali come in and actually talk to us. Let me tell you a little bit about her real quickly, just to give you some context. She is focused heavily in technology risk and federal cybersecurity. She's got a number of different accolades, like the Women Leaders in Consulting Award, and she's got a number of different leadership roles within GRC initiatives that are out there today. I should also mention, too, that she's a member of the GWDC board, and we'll get into some of that as well, too. But Nurali, I thought maybe what we could do is ask if you could spend a couple of minutes and tell us a little bit about your background and your journey in cybersecurity. What brought you into this particular area, specifically maybe in the context of governance, risk management, and compliance.
Yeah, thank you. So thanks again for having me. And, just to go back in time, I entered the market in 2000 when companies were in need of cybersecurity and ICAM experts, ICAM being Identity, Credential, and Access Management, which was highly evolving in the market back then, especially in the banking industry. So when I graduated, I applied into IT leadership programs across the East Coast, and I got into Fidelity Investments leadership program where you get to lead enterprise-wide large projects, and they pay for grad school at the same time, which was fantastic back in the day. So, I joined Fidelity Investments and had the lovely honor and privilege to lead their enterprise-wide ICAM program, where our team helped develop, implement, and monitor across the portfolios their ICAM program, which was a fantastic learning opportunity for me straight out of the gate out of college. And, that really got me excited about cybersecurity, all the GRC and technology risks that go along with the GRC program. And then for those of you, who know ICAM, that blends right into cybersecurity and now zero trust. And it's just such a fascinating field because of all the constantly evolving threats, emerging technology, the high demand for all the skilled professionals that we need, and just the wide variety of the roles and responsibilities and opportunities for innovation, and just the importance of the work itself. So again, technology just supports the business, and we all need to consider that cyber and technology risk in every part of the business process. So that's how I got in initially to the cybersecurity world, and just gravitated toward GRC and technology risk, the cyber area fields.
Understood. Hey, so I know you've worked at a lot of big accounting firms. Can you talk a little bit about how that's influenced where you're at today relative to it?
Definitely. So, after Fidelity Investments, because of that ICAM background I had, when I moved from, the Boston area down to the National Capital Region area, there were a lot of companies that wanted all those leading practices in this current market. And, McCormick being one, World Bank being another one, Toys R Us being another one. And so, Deloitte asked me to come over and start leading some of their ICAM programs, which was also a fantastic opportunity where I led ICAM projects. I also learned about Sarbanes-Oxley. So for those of you in the federal space, similar to the or A123 programs, I led a lot of ERP implementations for governance, risk, and compliance, and performed a lot of IV and V assessments. And then just implementing, GRC across the gaming industry as well. So during that time, the gaming industry needed several experts that would come in and help them with GRC implementations, standing up their governance, risk, and compliance program, especially when it came to some of the fraud work that they had and risks that were going around at that time in the banking and the gaming industry put together. They both wanted to work together, so that was also a wonderful opportunity. And just putting all those lessons learned into some of the commercial clients that they had was just fantastic. And then slowly but surely, I then moved over to the federal space. So I never worked in the federal space, but at PwC, they needed folks that truly understood the ICAM and cybersecurity GRC programs in their federal DoD, Intel, and civilian spaces. So I got to lead certain things as FISMA assessments and audits, internal cybersecurity audits and assessments such as penetration testing, social engineering services, network security and data protection, access controls and segregation of duties type assessments, vulnerability assessments, and incident response type work, and which was also fantastic and continued to just increase my portfolio of knowledge in cybersecurity, governance, risk, and compliance programs. And then I also got to experience being an auditor at the same time, which was amazing, but I did miss, providing those consulting advisory services, learning, how to not only identify what the issues are, but getting down to the cause of the issue and how to fix the problem and advise clients how to fix the problem. So doing that root cause analysis and advising on how to fix it. And then lastly, when KPMG was standing up their cyber practice back about 10 years ago, they were looking for folks to help come drive and lead. And I thought that was a fabulous opportunity for me to then move over to them and help them stand up that federal cybersecurity practice, which then led to doing some IT security audits, but then also helping them advise on the portfolio advisory clients. So I now help advisory clients, particularly DoD civilian clients, with their business transformation, huge portfolio projects, and then advising them on cybersecurity, IT, tech assessments, and those things that all support the business processes for transforming and meeting their goals and objectives. So just wonderful, wonderful experiences that I've had that I'm very grateful for.
So what role do you think that GRC plays in the federal space? Is it and I guess also what are some of the challenges if you consider it to be somewhat relevant and important?
Yeah, so just going back to, what is GRC, right? And when we think about it, we're thinking about it's a set of practices that helps develop organizations, including government entities, manage risk. So they're ensuring compliance with regulations and maintaining effective governance. And effective governance is just the backbone of any organization, including government bodies. It involves defining those organizational objectives, establishing policies and procedures, and ensuring that resources are used efficiently. So GRC does help government organizations streamline their governance processes, ensuring that transparency and accountability. So government organizations operate, as we all know, within a complex web of rules, regulations, and legal frameworks. So compliance refers to the adherence of these requirements. So it helps government bodies ensure that they're on the right side of the law by implementing those policy and controls, as well as monitoring and reporting compliance activities.
Got it. Hey, so talk a little bit about some of the shifts and some of the trends that you've seen in terms of organizations and how they try to prioritize GRC and their different security strategies. Any thoughts on that?
So GRC is not a one-time fix.
Okay.
That's what I'm definitely seeing. Folks think, we'll just put this in place and then we'll never go back to it.
Yep.
It's not the case. It's an ongoing process that evolves with the changing landscape. So as technology advances, government organizations are going to face new challenges and opportunities. The new buzzwords, zero trust, cloud security. We got automation, AI, ML, RPA. You got your 5G, low code, blockchain, legacy systems that are still going on, that are modernizing. So the role of GRC will continue to grow in importance as these organizations strive to adapt to digital transformation, address emerging risks, and enhance public service delivery. So GRC is going to play a vital role in government organizations by ensuring effective governance, managing risk, and ensuring compliance. So that's just going to be, the trend that we're going to keep hearing today. And it just enhances efficiency, fosters accountability, mitigates risk, and as government agencies face complexities, GRC is going to be their trusted ally in navigating the ever changing landscape.
One of the concepts, and I didn't put it on the question list for you, Nirali, but I'm kind of curious because I think it's kind of an interesting idea. Do you think that the idea of continuous improvement is, or quality, or however you want to define that, factors into what you just kind of described relative to the GRC programs within organizations?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. So continuous monitoring is huge, right? So again, the stronger your GRC practices are, the stronger your security posture is. And you have to continuously monitor that to make sure that you're continuously strengthening that security posture.
Got it. I guess what I was alluding to was, though, the idea of, rather than the security side of it, that because you kind of painted an interesting picture there for me, which was this idea that GRC is really kind of a set of tools and practices that help the organization, and it's not a one and done, right? It's a continuous thing. So I was just kind of wondering, like, I hear a lot about, the ISO world, like the 9001 and Six Sigma and all of these different kind of quality control mechanisms. And I was wondering if you see that organizations kind of take that kind of approach relative to how they manage their GRC programs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, definitely. So putting that in place, other things you could definitely do that goes along with what you just stated is regular audits. So you're conducting those routine audits to ensure that your organization remains compliant with those regulatory standards and that your governance, risk, and management efforts are up to date. Employee training, that's a big one. Regularly just training employees on cybersecurity best practices, incident reporting, and their roles in maintaining compliance. And then, just continuously assessing and updating your GRC practices to adapt with new cyber threats and evolving regulations is a big one. Because folks just, don't know that's why training is so important, because folks don't know what's constantly changing. What's constantly changing for your compliance mechanisms? What's constantly changing for those cyber threats? What are those evolving regulations that, how do you keep up to date with all that stuff? It's basically constant, continuous training, those regular audits, and always identifying, what is any issues that you're seeing, and then how do you enhance and secure that?
That makes sense. How about value for federal agencies? I'm just curious if they have, relatively robust GRC practices. How does that help out with the broader mission? I mean, a lot of times we think, unfortunately, in the government of this idea of a compliance checklist. I have to do this, I have to do that. But I assume in your world, the idea it goes beyond that, right?
Mm-hmm, definitely. So when it comes to, it's basically protecting your business, right? So how are you protecting your business, but also going to ensure that you're prepared to meet future challenges head on? So when it comes to protecting your business from cyber threats, it's relying solely on technical defenses like firewalls or antivirus software. It's just no longer enough right now. Today, you need more of a structured and comprehensive approach to cybersecurity. So understanding GRC within a cybersecurity context can benefit your business by providing that structured framework for managing not only external threats, but internal processes and regulatory obligations. So if your organization has not implemented GRC practices right now in your cybersecurity strategy, this is the time to start, right? Because that well-rounded GRC framework not only protects your business, but again, I'm going to repeat it because I want to make sure everyone understands it, that it also ensures that you're prepared to meet those future challenges head on. Because we're in an evolving world, and again, things are just constantly changing by the second.
That makes a lot of sense. Hey, Altan's going to throw a couple questions at you here. Altan, go ahead.
Yes, so Nurali, on the topic of continuous improvement and especially continuous monitoring, we know that you've been an author on one of the NIST special publications, 800-137, that is specifically targeted for federal information systems and organizations, continuous security monitoring for information systems. And I wanted to ask, the background on the development of that publication, and how do you see the environment changing and has changed since then with the massive adoption of cloud in all sizes of enterprises, including federal agencies and private enterprises as well. How does that factor into the efforts and challenges into ensuring visibility and having some level of assurance on the effectiveness of controls? And how does that factor into the overall GRC efforts? How do you see that changing and morphing into a more complex landscape?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, so it's different. So I know it's a long question. So I'll start answering them in.
Maybe we can start with the background of the development.
So that was, that's a wonderful NIST standard, in my opinion, in terms of, and I'm a little biased because I am a co-author of it, and so Jim's laughing at me over here, but and it's very important for businesses to improve their cybersecurity posture, implementing continuous monitoring practices that can be transformative, right? Like, because you're constantly transforming and you're constantly looking at all those new cybersecurity threats that are coming your way, and then you're also trying to figure out, how do I do it? Like, where do I start? So before you go through those, I kind of want to just start with just the essentials, and then I think that'll help. So government agencies came to us and said, here, we're checking the box when it comes to not just GRC, but like a FISMA audit or a financial audit or cybersecurity assessment or a network assessment. We've done our thing. We've put these practices in place. We've checked the box, and we're never going to go back to it. So then industry and government came together and said, we're going to put something out that helps people understand the importance of continuous monitoring and to constantly keep going back and not just checking the box. So that's how that originally came out with, let's put together some guidance and practices out there. So we got together, they selected a couple folks from industry, and they selected some folks from government and commercial to come together, and that's how all the authors came together. And NIST did a fabulous job of pulling together a diverse set of group of folks to then work together, put the whole standard together, and then we went back out to all of industry and government agencies and commercial entities and said, give us feedback. What are you guys seeing as challenges right now? And then we'll put together and address your comments, and then we'll put this back out for you guys to review. And it basically just goes through essential steps of what do you do? And, in this case, I'm going to tie it back to cybersecurity. But when you look at the standard, it's a little bit more general because it has to apply for all sorts of areas when it comes to continuous monitoring, but mainly addressing cybersecurity, in my opinion. So you're first going to, conduct that cybersecurity audit. So you're going to assess your current practices that you have there. That's going to reveal gaps in governance, risk management, and compliance. And this can include reviewing your existing policies, risk management processes, and compliance with relevant regulations. Then you're going to establish a governance framework. So once you identified any gaps, you're going to create that framework that outlines your cybersecurity policies and procedures. And that's going to cover areas such as data protection protocols, your employee roles and responsibilities in cybersecurity, incident reporting and response plans. And that framework is going to align with the broader business objectives to ensure that cybersecurity efforts support the organization's overall goals. And then third, you're going to identify and mitigate risks as you go through this. So you should conduct a thorough risk assessment to identify potential cybersecurity threats. And then once you've identified those risks, you're going to develop those mitigation strategies to address them. So, for example, if you find that phishing attacks are a significant risk, you might implement email filtering solutions that train employees to recognize those attempts. So I think in government agencies and commercial entities, we're constantly getting these emails that are, they're just trying to, do those pseudo female, those email filtering type tricks, in my opinion, to try to get us to
exercise.
Yeah, those exercises that are trying to get us to click on any buttons to see if we'll fall for them. I of course won't fall for them. I'm pretty good at this. No, never. And then the fourth one is align with compliance standards. So make sure your organization is up to date with relevant cybersecurity regulations and standards. So assign a compliance officer or a team to oversee this process because it's very important. And, government have specific frameworks they have to follow, and commercial entities such as PCI DSS for, payment processing, or, you're going to have your PII for handling personal data, for example. So that you're going to have to do. So, and then lastly, which again, I'm going to go back to the continuous monitoring again. So this is how it all comes back together, is you have to be aware of the fact that cybersecurity threats are constantly evolving. And, according to some recent survey that I just read, like 75% of security professionals have observed an increase in cyber attacks over the past year, which means for you all, the GRC framework should be dynamic, right? And again, the NIST standards go back to that too, that you have to regularly monitor your security posture, update policies as needed, and conduct those periodic audits to ensure continued compliance and risk mitigation.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to stay a bit more on the continuous aspect of that monitoring, because when we think about the monitoring of threats or external attack surface, that seems more straightforward to continuously monitor, because there are a lot of commercial tools and platforms that are basically built for that.
Mm-hmm.
But when we think about the internal posture and readiness, and maybe some of the more administrative controls and procedures, how do you see that continuous monitoring being implemented for those types of controls? Because a lot of times, especially as I'm an internal auditor,
Mm-hmm.
we observe that people, especially auditees, that the internal departments essentially have a certain amount of stress even during the regular audits that happen from time to time. And the idea of being continuously monitored feels a little bit overwhelming, even the thought, and maybe intrusive. I mean, to people who are not very well versed, or maybe just not coming from that perspective. How do you see, in terms of both implementing sort of a continuous monitoring program that would focus on internal controls like processes, and what would continuous mean in terms of the cadence, and how do you go about persuading people that's a great idea, both for them and for the institution overall?
That's a fantastic question. I really like that question, because that is a question that a lot of the security folks have been asking recently to a lot of the folks, because day in and day out you're focused on the mission. So you're really busy doing what you were supposed to be doing to protect, either as a cybersecurity professional, whether it's your network, your database layer, whatever you are doing, you're doing what your mission is requiring you to do. So you're bombarded with those activities, and then when you're asked to then continuously monitor and keep up with policies, keep up with procedures, keep up with all the additional aspects to your role and responsibilities you're doing day in and day out, can be daunting. I totally understand that. The one thing I always tell folks is you're already doing most of these security controls, and you're mostly developing and implementing them, and you may not even know it. So when you're currently doing your job day in and day out, you are most likely, when you're, let's just say, I'm giving an example. If it comes to access controls for ICAM, let's say you're a security manager at either a commercial entity or a federal entity, you're going and you're making sure that, again, whether it's automated or a manual process, that depends how often you're reviewing. But let's just say it's an automated process, and you're getting a request, whether it's a form, whether it's an automated through a system saying, Jim needs access to, perform X, Y, and Z on this IT system because he has this business process role in the organization. You're approving that based on, right, if this individual needs access to what he needs from a business perspective and an IT perspective. And then you're actually reviewing, you're confirming, and then you're authenticating him to that and approving that he needs that access, right? So you are actually doing what you're supposed to be doing from a control perspective. And then on the back end, maybe, depending on what role he has, if it's privileged user, you're going to be monitoring him more. But if it's not, if he's a normal user, then maybe you're reviewing him once a month. But you're already doing that, and you don't even know you're doing that part of a GRC program. That's the interesting part. So a lot of folks think, oh my gosh, it's going to give me so much more work on a daily, monthly, yearly basis, depending on what the control is. But in reality, you're probably already doing that anyways and don't know you're doing it. So that's number one. So I always tell folks that you are probably most likely 99.8% already doing the job and don't know it. Second thing is that documentation. Folks get bombarded with keeping and retaining documentation. That's another thing. But now with all the automated tools, like you mentioned, that exist, that's already tracking and done for you in an audit trail and an audit log. So that makes life a lot easier. So when you're asked to do these assessments, or if an auditor's coming to you and asking for that, that's done too automatically for you, which is fantastic. And if it's not done for you, then yes, it's going to be a little bit more work, but my guess is that you're already doing it for another assessment. And lastly, what we're trying to do is with AI, with a lot of the new auditing tools that's out there right now with AI built in, we're trying to make everybody's life easier by automating a lot of the processes for continuous monitoring. So a good example of that is now with some of the software tools that are out there that are managing ICAM, and then on top of that, when you have a GRC platform that sits on top or communicating, technology working together for better, that's my new word right now, they all talk to each other through these APIs that are built in so that when you are granting access to someone, it's capturing through an audit log, and then the AI then is then pulling that for you. So if I'm a security manager, guess what? Lo and behold, when Jim comes up on my list, I get to continuously monitor what he's been doing, and AI is actually capturing for me. I just have to look for the false positives, which is actually making my life a lot easier, more efficient, and I'm saving more time on the back end, and there's a cost savings aligned to it. So I would say definitely, make use of all these automated products. That's also a wonderful part about this evolving cyber world we're in, is taking advantage of all the automation that's out there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I just want to follow up with that in terms of addressing some of the maybe anxieties or worries about people being monitored, quote unquote, because you might have come across that reaction as well, before a program being implemented. And there's the question of who is doing the monitoring. Is that an external party? Is that an independent function, such as an internal audit unit? And there's the idea of what happens if a control fails. So have you seen a successful communication, maybe from that senior management perspective, in terms of what is the purpose of the monitoring program, and so that it'll be more natural and easier for people to get accustomed to that, because again, being watched over may not be very comfortable for everybody, especially if they're not used to the idea, and they might worry about potential consequence, if that control fails, what's gonna come down the pike, so to speak. So
yep, that's a good question, and I can actually bring a real world example in for this one. So back in the day when I was at a DoD client, right? We had, were asked to do back in the day, it was what was it called? It was for the financial statement audit. There were, at that time, some controls we were looking at related to HR processes. Mm-hmm. So some of you might remember this. And there was huge controversies over this for a financial statement audit back in the day. And folks would put their arms up in the air and say, well, this is ridiculous. And, we don't think these controls should be in place for federal entities. We go through a rigorous process where we look at security clearances. We make sure, X, Y, and Z is conducted to make sure that we have all the security controls in place and operating effectively for our hiring processes. So we don't need these controls. And then, we were put under a lot of pressure doing these internal and external assessments. When you say, who's conducting these, it could be internal or external. And at the time, I was doing it from an external entity. And, it was interesting because we were asked to do it. So we had to perform it. And folks were very, very frustrated, but we had to do it. And then lo and behold, so many years go by, right? And we're performing these. Lo and behold, data leakage has been happening. And guess who the data leakages are from? Insider threats, and it's usually folks that have been going through the processes, right? So, and not that security controls aren't in place, not that the HR processes, aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. Everything, all those controls and those processes are in place, but there can be failures. You can have the strongest control in place, and again, we do have those strong controls in place, but things happen. Right? Data leakages happen. You can have a network control in place, and guess what? You can get hacked. Just things happen. There are holes, right, in the processes. And so what I would say is insider threat is a good example, and network control is another a good example, where we found that there are holes in place and security controls, people have bypassed them and figured out a way to get through, and then we know what happens after that. So insider threats is another good example of an assessment that folks have performed where, yes, you're looking at what has been happening, what access controls folks have, what privileges do they have, what have they gone through, what have they accessed for the day, things like that. And, you are known, it's known that you're monitored, right? When I'm on my laptop, I'm being monitored. I know when I'm on a government computer, I'm being monitored. So, I know there's a lot of anxiety there. However, I know folks are doing what they're supposed to be doing for their role and responsibilities. But again, there's some holes, and that's why we are, performing those assessments and are continuously monitoring to make sure that those holes are patched up. And then, data, for example, in the case I'm using, stays in-house and doesn't get to external entities that shouldn't have access to it. Or, from a network example that I used, folks aren't hacking in and getting access to data that they shouldn't have access to. So it's, again, just closing up those loose ends and those holes from a monitoring perspective.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Hey, Nurali, I wanted to ask you, we talked earlier about the use of AI in the context of continuous monitoring and kind of from the audit process. I'm curious what your take is in terms of its use within the governance, risk management, and compliance world. Are you seeing any kind of trends where organizations are starting to utilize it to either help govern, to help conduct risk assessments, to help manage risk, or to help with other types of compliance activities? Any thoughts on that?
Yes, definitely. So, again, we're all learning together in the wonderful world of AI, and a lot of the software vendors are, implementing those AI transformational type additions to their software, right? So a good example of that is ICAM or some of the governance GRC platforms that are plugging in, here are all your controls and here are potential areas where there might be failures based on the data that it's pulling across the enterprise. Mm-hmm. So that can kind of help you as a starting point to understand, okay, here's the ones I should probably look at from a risk-based basis first, and then here's where I can look at last. Now, granted, it depends on the environment, and it depends on the data. So again, it's going to be as good as your data is, right? So garbage in, garbage out, et cetera, et cetera. So basically, but it's better than nothing, in my opinion. It's a very good starting point to understand. Here's some of the areas to look at based on the data we have. So from an ICAM perspective, what I just saw a use case for, which I thought was pretty good, was if I'm a security manager, it's giving me information from across the enterprise on people, what accesses they have, what privileges they have, and what kind of audit trails they've been, what kind of audit trails they're generating across the board, and what kind of segregation of duty conflicts that potentially exist automatically, which then gives me a good starting point on how to go through the process of, okay, what role does this individual have? Have they moved? Have they, if they're a global entity, right? Are they currently still in the U.S. or are they operating somewhere else globally? Do they still need the access that they need? Do they, what kind of accounting or financial or cyber privileges do they have? And does it still make sense for what they need? But so it's kind of nice because it's not just by system, but it's across multiple platforms. So it makes my job as that security authorizer or manager a lot easier, and it's a great starting point to identify if the person needs it, and then you're just identifying those false positives if needed.
Makes sense. Hey, I wanted to kind of turn the focus away from kind of the main topic of GRC and all the things, and I'm kind of curious if we could get into some of the kind of the emerging trends and maybe some of the future outlooks in this particular space. I thought maybe the first thing to ask or to kind of maybe delve into was the kind of cyber threats that you're seeing out there today that are maybe shaping the way that organizations are starting to think about how they're approaching their GRC efforts. Any thoughts on that? Yes,
definitely. We're seeing a lot of trends. So I think third-party risk is one of my favorites to talk about. As the landscape continues to evolve, GRC practices will go beyond simply meeting those compliance objectives. So insights from governance and risk management will also play a significant role in strategic compliance decisions made across industries and businesses. But taking that holistic, horizontal approach can strengthen your organization's security posture against potential cyber threats and data breaches. So it's growing extended enterprise, right? So today, companies and government is just increasingly dependent on third parties and fourth parties to provide mission critical services. So whether it's payroll processing or managed web hosting, every outsourced service comes from greater regulatory and risk exposure. So to mitigate the risks created from an expanding network, you're going to need ways to optimize their tech stack and have deeper visibility into all your vendors. So that's why I think third-party and fourth-party vendor risk management is going to be huge going forward, and then performing those continuous risk assessments on those parties is going to be very important because, as we all know, those vendors are going to have other business partners, and then as those other business partners are doing work with us, especially when it comes to global and U.S., alliances and things, that's going to become very important. The other thing that I like to chat about, I know there's going to be several trends, but is just the need for redefined GRC platforms. So every day we're hearing about new IT risk and cybersecurity threats all the time, like I mentioned. But current GRC cybersecurity challenges that include that third-party cloud-based network attacks can be like also data wiping, hacking, and then just the weaponization of legitimate tools, right? So unfortunately, GRC platforms of the past just can't keep up with all the fast-changing environments. So older solutions are still going to require that ad hoc coordination, manual processes that lead to like a lot of duplicative evidence collection, and again, what we mentioned earlier, employee fatigue, and then just higher compliance costs. So we're just going to have to keep needing that redefined GRC platform as well.
That makes sense. Hey, I was also curious, another buzzword that you hear a lot about today is, and I think you kind of brought it up earlier, was the idea of zero trust. And that's kind of a new paradigm, at least conceptually, from the old kind of model that we had where we identified perimeters and where we launched different types of defenses or provided different kinds of defenses. Today, with zero trust, there's an expectation that every system is potentially hackable. We got to look at it on a much more system-by-system basis. How does that play into the whole kind of GRC framework, and how do organizations that adopt zero trust, in your estimation, try to manage that? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So at the core of zero trust, we all know the philosophy is to never trust, always verify, right? So rather than automatically granting access based on that network location or credentials, Zero Trust is going to verify identities through multi-factor authentication and continuous monitoring. So this is going to mean the system is evaluating risk continuously, assessing each access request contextually. So the aim is to safeguard sensitive data by minimizing the risk of unauthorized access. So in practice, Zero Trust is going to limit those access rights to the minimum necessary. Thus the principle of least privilege, ensuring users only have access data relevant to their roles, like we talked about. But one other important thing is Zero Trust also employs micro-segmentation. So it's dividing that network into smaller protected segments. We're seeing that more and more across all our clients, that's making it more challenging for those attackers to move laterally across the network. Thus, it bolsters data protection by creating multiple security layers. So ultimately, Zero Trust is going to be that comprehensive security framework. It's going to adapt to modern security threats by assuming that breaches can occur at any time.
Understood. Okay, so let's talk about some other aspects. You see a lot of organizations out there today focus, and I think we kind of alluded to this as well too, this idea of digital transformation. Altan asked about cloud. But one of the things that, we're starting to see a lot of now is remote work, where people aren't necessarily physically together, and the adoption of other types of interesting technologies when we get into things like Internet of Things along maybe operational technologies. How do you think that GRC is going to need to evolve in order to be able to remain effective within this kind of evolving landscape of the technology and the way that businesses are operating?
I like that question because I'm going to go back to my quote, better together technologies, right? So GRC mobility and engagement is going to be very important as we go forward. I mean, as government and the organizations move more data to the cloud and application infrastructures, GRC architecture is just quickly adapting to address the interconnected risks, including dynamic risk and control mapping that emerge from the growing network of systems and operations. So with the increased reliance on software applications and changes in the regulatory frameworks, you're going to need to develop that new approach to GRC compliance. So solutions that combine compliance content, those automation capabilities, and expert guidance can bridge the gap between strategy and execution. So bringing all that data into like a centralized portal or interface that's supported on mobile devices is going to deliver more of that intuitive user experience that's easily accessible to the business. So 100% agree. It's going to be very important. So technologies that work better together, and also that mobility and engagement from a GRC perspective that's right at your mobile device is going to be very important as we move forward.
So in terms of the capability and the speed at which, when you think about how fast things are changing in terms of, especially with the IoT and AI space, that you see a lot of democratization inside of organizations, and sometimes it can be quite chaotic. And I was hoping to get your thoughts on how can GRC stay ahead of, or at least try to stay ahead of, some of those developments that can be quite unpredictable, and even with the implementation of Zero Trust, you kind of alluded to the continuous monitoring and identity verification, but a lot of times with IoT devices, for example, you have trouble with even establishing the identity of the device, like separating one device from another, for example. They're built to be quite simple, to serve a single function, and those can be very challenging for operational teams as well too. So in terms of both overall approaches to keeping the frameworks up to date with the, especially in the realm of AI, obviously, we see a lot of governments trying to implement guidance and responsible AI frameworks. How do you see that? The efforts, do you think they're adequate in being able to keep up with the technology's advance, or do you have any thoughts on how can it be better overall? I
agree, and I agree. It's the the world of cyber risk is evolving, right? So we're all learning together, and the best we can always constantly keep doing is looking at the frameworks that we already have, the ones that we're creating. There are GRC working groups as well, especially for IoT. At the for DoD, I know they're looking at it at the OSD level. For the commercial entities, I know they're looking at a national level with other guidance that they have. With the working groups that are in place, and they're constantly in these working groups talking about those security controls and evolving risks that are happening. Now, again, working groups I know are different than what's on paper. It takes some time for the working groups to get everything on paper and then get it shipped to everybody else that's working in the workspace. But there's lots of different web pages out there that kind of and websites, I should say, not web pages, but websites that are out there that will help you through this process, right? And I know DISA is constantly putting out their web page, or is constantly putting out STIGs and other IoT awareness pages that are out there that will tell you about the recent security controls that are in place. And I'll be honest with you, like I played around with my Samsung IoT device, and lo and behold, I'm opening and closing my next door neighbor's garage. Sorry about that. But, if you're listening, my neighbor. But, so I am also a component
Maybe that's
of that.
something we'll cut out, Jim.
But,
No, that's great. That's the kind of real world examples we want to hear. That's awesome.
But
I'm sitting here laughing, but I had my mic off. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, but, and the same thing. So I kid you not, my neighbor called me and said, "Oh my God, Nurali, my garage door keeps opening and closing." And then lo and behold, I thought to myself, "Oh, I'm playing with my fridge," but I'm, probably did something next door. So, again,
It gives you some idea.
Yes, exactly. So again, we're learning about these IoT security controls and devices, and you're right. When I'm setting that up, I did not see their device and what I'm connecting to. You just see the number, right? So, but again, it's learning that, controlling that, and locking it down, right? So again, for IoT, like in my house, that fridge does not have a number. It's completely locked down, and it can't be connected to unless it's coming directly from me and my cell phone, right? So and nobody else can even see it. So again, it's just making sure that people are aware. You're training your folks. You're locking things down. You're making sure that you're not using a common password if it's a router or if it's an IoT device. There are common passwords for that too. So things like that I think we have to make folks aware of, and people are constantly trained on in order to make sure that they're up to date on the latest and greatest IoT technology and the controls that are around to protect it.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when you come across examples like that, asking where's the TLS certificate for this IoT device becomes kind of like too much to ask for the technology that you're looking at, right? So I would assume that would be part of the challenge in developing like a standardized approach. Like you need to have the identity vouch for some external party, or some sort of that baseline expectation may not always be practical or possible in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
And other than that, do you see any like palpable pain points in developing guidance and like standards for the recently emerging and potentially disruptive technologies? And maybe we can talk a little bit more about the AI in terms of like what are the baselines that organizations need to adopt, both for federal and like private.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I'll hit your first question first, which is challenges, right? So a lot of folks will say, "Oh my goodness, I have so many laws, so many regulations. Again, I'm doing stuff for the mission. Well, this is just too difficult." And what I always say is take a step back and let's figure out, your as is. So what are you doing currently? What are your compliance and regulations you have to, depending on the industry, depending on your sector, for if you're, are you commercial? Are you banking? Are you, what are you doing first for your mission and your goals? If you're federal, are you DoD, civilian? Are you Intel? There's different laws and regulations, right? So again, let's figure that out first. What's your as is? And then let's look at everything you have to comply with. And then how many assessments you're performing internally, how many assessments are you getting externally currently? And then let's figure out a game plan. What are those security controls that you have to hit first that have to hit all those laws and regulations, right? And then let's look at and do a gap analysis of what else you can be doing from a transformation perspective in terms of policy. And then, what's the gap? What do we need to do more of in order to make sure that you're not only compliant, you got to be compliant first, but then what do you got to do more of to get prepared for all the changes that are coming about so that you're ahead of the game? You're not only ahead of making sure that you're not just hitting something, you're not just checking the box, but you are a well-oiled machine, and you have everything down from a security perspective, and you've locked it all down, and then you can help prevent anybody from, addressing and taking advantage of any security flaws or holes that you possibly may have, right? And I think a good job, the GRC NIST is also a good framework that helps manage overall GRC and compliance policies. I believe it's NIST IR 8272 that outlines GRC best practices specifically for federal agencies. And that can be used by any organization, to be honest with you, to improve GRC policies and to ensure that they're compliant with laws and regs. Some key points, it talks about governance, it talks about risk management, compliance, and it's just all guidelines on how to, break down and improve all those your barriers and break down and improve all those policies and processes. So, and I believe they're in 4 categories. They bucket it into governance, risk management, internal controls, and security and privacy. And so it just provides that roadmap to create and implement GRC policies. And it ultimately helps you protect against potential issues and ensure that you're operating smoothly and ethically. So that's another good one, I would say. It's a good one for you all to follow. And the other one is, the one we've talked about already, which is Information Security Continuous Monitoring, the ISCM, for federal information systems and organizations. So that's that continuous monitoring strategy that I helped co-author as well. And that's the implementation of that program, providing visibility into organizational assets, the awareness of threats and vulnerabilities, and visibility of effectiveness and in deployed security controls. The other one I would recommend is 853, which we all know, the revision 5 that's out there. And then obviously 837, which is, if you're in the federal sector, right, anytime a system goes online or anything that you need to do, it has to get ATO'd, so you have to go through those risk management framework processes to get it authorized on a network. And believe it or not, the federal's done a good job with the RMF process, where commercial entities, are using that as a leading practices as well. And they're actually going through and utilizing 837. They're not per se calling it the RMF process, but they're utilizing those standards to kind of help them strengthen their processes in-house. And those are just a couple of examples that you can start off with, but that lays a really good framework and for you to get started with.
That's very insightful and definitely complex, but doable, right?
Yep.
Okay, so I wanted to kind of move on. Time is just flying by. We've got 5 minutes left. Hard to believe. We've spent almost an hour together, huh? Unbelievable.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Hey, I think you've kind of alluded to this already, but if you could kind of sum up in simple terms for leaders out there, how would they go about trying to future-proof their GRC programs? I mean, I know you talked about, for example, a lot of the frameworks in 853, but are there some kind of high-level points that you could kind of leave everybody with to say, well, because of all these emerging technologies, go with the framework, or, follow these kind of best practices? Any specific thoughts on how leaders might approach trying to ensure that 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 18 months from now, their GRC program is not outdated or completely overcome by current events? Any thoughts?
Yeah, that's a very popular question across a lot of our clients, to be honest with you. And I would say continuously refreshing it, right? So looking at those, the guidance that I just kind of said recently, looking at that and just taking that fresh perspective that you've embedded those correct controls in place to continuously assess, because lots of folks don't change their as is. Does that make sense? So every year, looking at your as is process that I talked about, that includes those security controls you're going to assess, is very key, because as you go on each year, folks they possibly may just be testing the same thing, which is outdated. There's new cybersecurity threats to consider. There's new things that you need to bring into your plans for those assessments that need to be considered. So you have to do that as is before you start, reviewing your controls each year. Just perform that as is every year, and make sure you've captured everything in your strategy in order to get to your future state, which is then looking at a revised set of security controls you're assessing as part of your strategy to make sure that you're good to go to address all those future threats.
Awesome. Hey, I did mention during the intro that you're on the GWDC board. I said we would talk about it, so we've only got a couple minutes left, but I do want to cover that. What are you doing on the the ISACA Washington, D.C. chapters board this year?
Yeah, so this year, in the prior years, I was the marketing director, which I loved and enjoyed, and now I moved over to the external outreach, relations side, and it's been a great opportunity where I get to meet and talk to commercial industry and government side of folks, and then just get to know them and market out what ISACA does and how we can help them, and vice versa, how they can help us to kind of get out there and explain to them that ISACA works in the digital trust fields, and we specialize and have folks with information security backgrounds, governance, assurance, risk, privacy, and we're large, right? We have that presence in 188 countries with 225 chapters worldwide, and have lots of folks credentialed in the CISA and CRIS certifications, which also is very beneficial for our GRC, by the way. So when you're looking for folks to come in and help you with doing a lot of that work in the GRC realm, again, ISACA can also help and support because they have all those certifications available for your folks at your organizations and government entities to then help perform these assessments that I talked about, and they'll have the right qualifications and credentialing for it.
Understood. Hey, we've got a minute left. Can you tell our listeners how they can connect with you or find more information on your work?
You can feel free and reach out to me on LinkedIn or on X. I'm on both websites, and I know Jim, I know your show is also on there too, so that's fantastic. So feel free to reach out to me via either one of those social platforms.
Awesome. Well, Nurali, we want to thank you for coming in and sharing your expertise with our audience. We talked about a wide range of topics, but they were all centered around governance, risk management, and compliance, GRC. And we want to just direct our listeners to the ISACA-GWDC website. So if you get an opportunity, check out the Greater Washington, D.C. chapter of ISACA at www.isaca-gwdc.org. And you can check out future versions of our podcast there. Thanks a lot for joining us. Altan, any final words?
I mean, you summed up very, very nicely, Jim. It's been a great show, and thanks again, Nirali, for coming on the show here. It's been fantastic. So.
Thank
Awesome.
you, Bo. Thanks, Altan. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate
Thanks, everyone.
having me on the show. Thank you.
Absolutely. We'll see everybody in our next episode. Thanks so much. Have a good day.